the Eora are probably hoping that just like with Cook, they're only going to stay for a week and then leave again.
Yeah.
But obviously they're not. They plant the flag. This is now British Crown territory and they're not going anywhere. So the Eora people, they hide and they like flee from the settlement. And you don't find many Indigenous people in that initial settlement period. Philip is like, this is not going to be a long-term strategy.
So just quickly, so where have they settled? Do you know?
Sydney Cove.
Like whereabouts exactly along the Parramatta River are they? Or
so where the Harbour Bridge pretty much is today.
Yeah, okay.
So like Darling Harbour, not quite as far east as like the eastern suburbs.
Yep.
But yeah, just a little bit further west along the Parramatta River. Mm-hmm. So the Eora people, they flee and they're nowhere to be found. And Philip's like, this isn't going to be a long-term strategy because we are going to have to relate to each other. We're going to keep expanding. The Indigenous people don't know that, but Philip's like, we're just going to keep expanding here. We've got to have some communication, got to have some dialogue, but they can't find Indigenous people. So what he does is he starts to kidnap them. Okay. And basically, Indigenous people rightfully are like very fearful for their life. And she'll be like, no, I'm just trying to kidnap you.
I just want to talk.
The rather sad part is that obviously there's no smallpox immunity, so when they get kidnapped, they die of smallpox.
Yeah, right.
And
so all you're seeing as an Indigenous person is someone who kidnaps your friends and then they die.
A white person? As an Indigenous person.
You watch a white person take your friend and then that friend dies.
Yes. And again, that's exactly like we talked about North Sentinel last time. That's exactly like the North Sentinelese philosophy towards British people. Probably why they killed that American missionary so quickly was because that story's been passed down. That with their magic powers, they kind of kill people. Anyway, so if you're an Indigenous person, you've just seen white person kidnap, like we'll take a Rabbanu, for example, kidnap a Rabbanu, and then they die of smallpox.
Who was a Rabbanu? Sorry?
An Indigenous person, a prominent person in the Eora people. Another person who was captured, the reason why his name, another person who was captured but didn't actually die was Benelong.
Yeah.
You heard that name before?
I think I have.
Yes. So
Benelong's not the one they took back to. Who was the one they took back to?
Benelong.
Yeah, okay.
So Benelong gets captured. The crazy thing is that Benelong learns English really quickly.
That's the Crown in UK. That's the Englishman in you.
Or Gaelic. But he learns English very quickly.
Okay.
Which is so impressive. Like that is what an achievement to be able to learn English at lightning fire. Like I did maybe 4 years of French, which is a
much more tangential language than
all I know is a CFU, which I think really didn't sit down. So
je m'appelle.
So very impressive on Benelong's part. Benelong, he then dines with Arthur Phillip quite regularly. So they have some dinner parties together.
Okay. And
Benelong tells Philip stories about war, and Philip really likes that. And Benelong's like, okay, this guy's pretty easy to figure out. Just rather than talk about the Roman Empire, talk about war.
Is that the equivalent of sports back then? It's just talking about war.
So that goes pretty well for him. And then Benelong escapes.
Interesting.
So
whilst in England, he escapes.
No, so this is all in Australia.
Okay.
He hasn't gone to England yet.
Yeah.
So Benelong escapes. And basically what happens is word gets to Philip that Benelong is in Manly Cove.
Okay.
Now, Benelong is a Wongal man. That's kind of inner western Sydney.
Yep.
Goes right up to the Parramatta River, but he's more of an inner west. But he's in Manly Cove, which is North Sydney. So
he's got to cross the river.
Yes, and he's
took the harbour tunnel.
Yeah. And the thing is like all the other Indigenous nations that are now, they're like, man, this guy, because we're going to have to band together to kind of work this situation out. And Benelong is kind of really respected. Later, a narrative would be written that he's a bit of a traitor for talking to the English and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But certainly not at that point in history. So Arthur Phillip, he brings a little squadron out and he goes to, it kind of, I reckon it would have felt like kind of like a drug standoff or that sort of thing.
Like a, say my name.
Yeah. So he brings his boys. Benelong's got his warriors with him as well. Yeah. And they kind of meet at Manly Cove together. And Benelong sees Philip come off the boat. He doesn't run away or anything. And there's this really tense standoff. Philip tells his men to put their guns down. And Philip's like, well, I want to work this out. Put your guns down. Let's talk. Bennelong points to a scar on his chest, on his own chest. So like where he'd been speared. And like Philip can't work out what's going on here. When Philip says, put your guns down, one of Bennelong's surrounding warriors spears Philip right where Bennelong was pointing to his scar.
Wow.
Different interpretations of what that meant. Some have argued that they wanted just to kill Philip right there and then. I think that's unlikely. Warriors know how to spear very well. They would have hit him in a more fatal spot. Also, just finish him when he's on the ground.
Yeah.
Not that hard.
Yeah.
I think a much more likely interpretation was that Bennelong was pointing to a spear mark to say, you'll be fine. As if to say, you're going to have to go, welcome to Indigenous country. This is a rite of passage. You'll live. As he points to his scar. That's
So they think that this scar was some sort of, like, that they all had to, like a sort of a coming of age kind of thing or something.
Yeah, either done ceremonially or through war.
Yeah.
And it's like, either way, you've acquired that scar to prove your toughness and prove that you belong in Indigenous country.
Yeah.
So basically, he does that. He spears Philip. Philip and his men, they get onto the boat and Philip orders no retaliatory attack.
Okay.
Yeah, again, there's more shades of grey to the narrative than colonist bad, colonist good. And so basically, he says, absolutely not. No retaliatory attack. Some historians have even called this the first attempt at reconciliation. Mm-hmm. If it stayed as is, there could have been peaceful coexistence for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Because at that point, yep, we're square. You've come and you've settled on our land. If you're going to live in our land, you've got to live in you have to go through this rite of passage. We've speared your leader in the shoulder. He's had to prove his toughness, and he has. And Bennelong and Philip would actually frequently dine after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd imagine it came up at dinner one time. And they're like, so can we just talk through what happened in Manly?
So about that. And Bennelong did end up going to England.
Like of his own volition? Like he just wasn't put
on the ship. Was like a diplomat sort of thing.
Yeah.
So he wanted to see what British society was like, and then he came back and decided he wanted nothing to do with it. And he was like, yeah, it's kind of a flop. It's cold, it's miserable. It's a lot more free living in an Indigenous way.
Yeah, imagine just like the grey of, well, actually, I guess it's pre-industrial Britain, but like.
Well, no, it's still somewhat industrial. Yeah.
Yeah. Proper.
Yeah.
Industrial revolution, but still very
yeah.
very mechanical, and it would be very different.
So basically, Bennelong decides, this place kind of sucks. We don't know if he might have met King George. We don't know for sure. And he went along the Thames and that sort of thing, and kind of was like, man, I think the Parramatta's a bit better.
Yeah. Did he climb the Shard?
Went to a Millwall game. So yeah, it was from Bennelong's point of view, it's a bit of a letdown, and he just returned to live an Indigenous life. He could write in English, which again is also very impressive. So he wrote a letter. The first known piece of English writing from an Indigenous person was a letter to the family that hosted Bennelong, where he was like, thanks for hosting me. It was really courteous of you to have me, all that sort of stuff. So in the early 1790s, things actually seemed pretty good. Not, again, not from an Indigenous perspective, but from a coexistence perspective. Yeah. Obviously, for an Indigenous person, you've still got unwanted visitors that are on your land. Yeah. But considering how far south it could have gone, it hasn't gotten to that point yet. So Philip has got a bit of a problem, though. So the second fleet's rocked up now.
The second fleet?
Yeah. There's other fleets, man.
Everyone talks about the second fleet. Yeah. What year was that?
I think 1790, 1791, sometime around there. But the issue is that the supply ships keep going down.
They keep going down?
Yeah, the supply ships keep sinking. Or losing materials on board, and the first fleet is running hungry. Yeah. Obviously, you just grow your own stuff at that point. Sydney Cove isn't great agricultural land. I haven't seen too many farms where we live.
Yes, true.
But they tried to grow crops, and it didn't work so well at Sydney Cove. Yeah. To get good farming territory, you actually had to go further down the river where the water's fresher. So Philip's kind of like with Bennelong, he's kind of like, oh yeah, we were thinking we might move down the Parramatta River. Bennelong's like, hard no. He's like, you will not survive going down the river. And Bennelong actually does try to warn Philip. He's like, you've gotten off pretty okay in eastern Eora country, but you go down to anything further west of the Wungal country, down the Parramatta River, you will get a really hard time. The colonists also, in order to get food, they outsource that to Indigenous people. So they trade with Indigenous people. So they hire a guy called Pemaway to be a hunter.
I've heard of Pemaway as well.
Yeah, he's going to be really important. So Pemaway basically hunts food for the colonists in exchange for materials. And because he's got the skills, they've got the materials, and they kind of do a trade that way. Pemaway is from Bidjigal land.
Okay.
Bidjigal land, it's kind of fluid in the sense that it's not as easily definable with borders as some of the other Indigenous nations. It stretches pretty much along the Georges River.
Yep.
It also stretches as far out as Botany Bay,
Okay.
which means that as a young boy, Pemaway probably would have stood at La Perouse watching Captain Cook interact with the Weagle people. He's the one who would have been watching on the other side of the bay.
Interesting. Great narrative arc you've constructed there.
It's fascinating history.
Yeah.
I mean, my gut reaction is boo, year 3, like, but it's so good.
Yeah.
Good in the sense of interesting, not in terms of outcomes. So Philip basically goes down he ignores Bennelong's advice. He goes down the Parramatta River, and in the attempt of establishing farmland down the river. Pemaway is the guy that's like, hard no. He is the guy that Bennelong warned him about. He was like, there is a warrior that you should not mess with down the river.